This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.
A practical prayer is a prayer that works.
These discussions between Reverend Bill Marchioni and Carol Lawrence dive into the details of how it works and how to work it.
Reverend Bill is a New Thought minister and the author of Practical Prayer for Real Results.
Your new life begins with a new thought.
Carol Lawrence is on a spiritual quest, finding the New Thought teaching after decades on the pulpit in 3 different traditional denominations.
I've got some questions.
Together, they're exploring the philosophy and activities that come together from many of the world's religions to create the practical spirituality that is New Thought.
Welcome to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol Lawrence with Reverend Dr. Bill Marchioni.
It's early. Here. We're here with the Practical Prayer Podcast, and you wanted to talk about getting something new.
Yeah, because this is New Year's and New Year. It's a new year. Get that mixed up. Anyway, it's like, what is this, the 8th? So I think etiquette says that we legitimately can say Happy New Year up to 7 days, and then after that, you do what you want. But people are still thinking about new and what they want new for their lives: weight, exercise, relationship, you name it. Every time I talk to somebody, it's about wanting something new. But what I shared with you earlier, and I'd like you to talk about it, is that new happens when you do something new. You can't wish and pray for something new to happen. You have to be a part of it. And how much a part of it is...
You always do what you've always done. You always get what you always got.
Right. But, yeah. And so I think our participation is important, with that creating your own reality kind of thing, that line that people use. And I mean no disrespect by that, but you are being a part of. So you can't just pray for something to happen or sit there and hope. If you want new, you have to do new.
That's true. Or at the very least, you have to be willing to do new. You have to be willing to let go of what we've been doing before to allow something new to happen. The Quakers had a very convenient, concise way of putting it, which is pray and move your feet. So
yeah.
Okay. I made it a little more complicated. If you're lost in the woods, pray and start walking, because God's going to guide you, but your feet are going to carry you.
I think that clarifies it. You said more complicated. I think that clarifies it quite.
Well, I definitely use more words.
It clarifies it. Because here's the other part that I had mentioned to you before, is how long does it take for new to happen? It could be instantly, or it could take time, but we don't know that. And I think, because I've experienced both, and my expectation or hope that if I change this is going to happen like in 15 minutes or less. But you don't know. So I think the concentration should be on our part of our part of the new, or moving our feet, right?
And the choices are, what are my activities and actions and choices now? And then how much time do I allow for the unfolding? So I will tell you the story that started years and years and years ago. It was probably in the late 1990s, early 2000s. So I'm relatively new to this house that I'm living in. And I thought, and we got some landscaping done and put in some trees. And my wife and the arborist decided that one of the trees that was going to get put in was a weeping cherry tree, so like a willow. And I thought, oh, that's cool. And I was currently in a class, and there's the metaphor of that you can be um, flexible like a willow or sturdy like an oak. And when the wind comes blowing, they both react differently. So the willow is much more accommodating and the oak is much more strong. And I thought, wouldn't it be cool to have both of those in my yard? So my teacher, we were taking classes in her house in New Jersey, and she had a bunch of oak trees in her backyard. And it was fall, and I said, I'd love to have an oak tree. So I came to class one night, and she had a little oak sapling in a Dixie cup. And she gave it to me. She said, here, this found this in the backyard. You can have it. So I thought, oh, that's great. I'm going to plant that. I'm going to have an oak tree. And I'm going to have a weeping cherry tree. And it's going to be a little metaphysical, metaphorical story right there in my yard. And then the sapling died. I mean, I don't think I got it home before that thing was withered. So it was not going to do anything. And some number of weeks later, the arborist came in and looking around the job that they're going to do. And there was a scruffy pine tree that was too close to the house. He said, we'll take this out too. I said, great. And growing up next to it was a sapling of an oak tree. He says, yeah, we'll get rid of this. And I said, no, I'll leave that one. And the thing was like maybe 6 feet tall. So he said, okay. So they planted the weeping cherry and the other plants that were in the backyard, and they straightened out this oak tree, and they took out the pine tree. And so I had a little oak tree and a relatively mature weeping cherry in my backyard. And they grew and they grew and they grew and they continued to grow. And then 3 or 4 years ago, the weeping cherry got diseased. So we had it taken out. And the oak tree continued to grow. It's like 40 feet tall now, to the point where my next door neighbor is like, who in the world would plant an oak tree between 2 houses? And it's like, me. That was my idea. I didn't decide where it was going to go. It decided. And so it continues to unfold. And there's another saying that the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. And the second best time is today. Mm-hmm. So that's a long story to address what you were asking about, which is doing something new. So I had an idea that I wanted an oak tree, and I thought it was going to come from my teacher's house, and that didn't work. And then there's an oak tree that came from a completely different source. And then there's the wondering 20 years later, was that a good idea?
So what do you think?
I think that we are always in the moment, making the choices that we're making, doing the best that we can, given the opportunities that are at hand. And I didn't grow the oak tree. The oak tree was already there and growing. I prevented it from being taken out and opened the way. I made the decision. I made the choice to allow it to continue to grow. And all the growth that's happened it has nothing to do with me. I mean, I've been maintaining it, but it's not me doing the growth. It's the oak tree that's doing the growth. So when we want something new, we have to be willing to let go of what had been there, to make some space for it, and then do what is ours to nurture it and get out of the way for everything else.
Yeah. I think, and I'm thinking about doing what is ours. We don't always know what that is. But I tend to be slow and methodical about things. And so I'm always thinking about the next step. If I do this, what are the variables? What might happen if I do this, this, and this? Well, it's a little slow. I think I probably drive some people crazy, but what the heck? That's how my father was. And, I'll leave that alone. But it's good because I get being a reformed control freak. Would you call me reformed
or recovering control freak? I think
recovering control freak gives me time to rethink things and see what it is to mine to do. And most of the time is to, like the tree, just back off and let it grow. And if I have some input or something that's required of me, I'll know as we go, rather than handling every piece of it in the beginning,
Yep.
which,
Well, I'm gonna ask you a question that almost seems rhetorical,
yes.
in that I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is. So, and I'm very familiar with the circumstances. Saying, all right, I'm observing what the situation is. I know what the pieces are, and I understand that if I take this next step, then this is how the unfolding is likely to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever had the experience of figuring all that out and having it not work at all? So I'm going to take this
Yes.
step and then like crash and burn. Or
Yes.
you're getting ready to take the first step, and the fifth step that you were thinking about getting to 6 months from now suddenly happens.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's nice to think that we are the ones who are making the choices and who are in control. But that kind of proves to us that it's well beyond what we have control over.
I have a little thing that I say, right? That helps me. When I get to that part where it didn't do anything the way I thought, whatever step, I stop and I say, listen, God, this is not what we discussed. It's not what we discussed. I need some clarity here. Now, that sounds arrogant. When I say that to people, they're like, oh, you talk to God that way? But it's not. It's me saying, we had a discussion. It was probably just me doing the talking, and imagining that God is just going to sanction and go along with everything. Sometimes yes, sometimes no, but it's enough to make me understand that I am not in control driving this thing 100%.
Yep. And
sometimes it's coming up. Yeah.
The less
Go ahead.
specific we are about the new that we're looking for, the more latitude we allow for it to come into being.
Okay, so right there, you could stop right there when you say the less we say or we expect.
The less specific we are.
Less specific. You do need to be specific sometimes, right?
You need to be clear.
Okay.
For example, prosperity. So we can, in our practical prayer, say a prayer for a specific amount of money. So I have this event that's coming up and it's going to cost this much, and I'm going to set the intention to have $6,000, an extra $6,000 show up in my life somehow, and then get hired for a side job, or have an investment pay off unexpectedly, or get a gift from somebody else, or the car gets totaled and suddenly the payment includes an extra $6,000. We can be specific in that way, but it is usually a lot better for us when we set the intention of, I understand that this is the financial situation that I'm in, so I open myself up to the infinite abundance that exists everywhere, and I know that everything is paid for and everything is taken care of, in which case, perhaps whatever it is that I needed the $6,000 for, I don't need the $6,000 anymore. Somebody says, oh, that trip we're going on? No, I'm taking you on that trip. Mm-hmm. You must not have understood. You never had to pay the
$6,000. So it's leaving room for all possibilities.
Exactly. The less specific, the broader we can be about the intention that we're setting, the more open we can be to the good showing up for us, the more avenues we allow for that good to show up. Because sometimes it might show up as an acorn planted in a little plastic cup, and sometimes it might show up as something that's already been there in the side of the yard that we didn't notice.
Yeah. Here's how things, to your point, some things happen that way. I tend to hide money. And I don't know if I think about hiding it, but whenever I get more than I expected or whatever, I'll put it in different places. Invariably, I forget it. I mean, I'll put it there thinking, okay, this is what I'll get when I need it. I always forget it. I even forget that I have it or whatever. So the other day, I opened a drawer and there was money. I don't remember when I put it there, but it was me. I did it because I know how I pack my little treasures. I looked at it, I said, this is me. And it was perfect because I said, well, I got to go out. And I grabbed a certain amount. And it was like, I thought I was going to have to save money to get what I wanted. I didn't even think that I'd get it when I went out. I thought, I got to save for this. And when I got to the store, I had put the money in my pocket. And the thing I wanted was on a gigantic sale. Gigantic sale. Can I tell you how much more money I needed? 12 cents. And and I reached in my other pocket where I had a bunch of change, and I'm looking at this at the counter, and I'm thinking, God, Spirit, whoever's out there, look at this. I counted out 12 cents and gave it. I was just having a delightful time at the register. And it was interesting that the gentleman who was the cashier, he had one hand and the other had been amputated. And he said, is this the exact amount of money? Because I don't feel like counting it. And I said, it is exactly right because I have a clip on each 10. He looked at this and he looked at me. It was like he didn't have to count it each. It was right there. He said, great. He said, you want these clips back? I said, yeah, give me my clips.
There you go.
So, yeah, it's all I have to
interesting
say
when you tell that story, and there's the shopping expedition you want to go on, and you think, oh, I have to save for this, and it turns out you already had.
Yes.
You already had. That's the partnership with the infinite. Let's take a break and then continue discussing getting something new.
Here's Reverend Bill letting you know that the Practical Prayer for Real Results class is now available on demand. That's right, you can take it at your own pace, anytime you want. All of the information is at bethelight.com. That's b-the-light.com. You know where to find that stuff. The class is 5 lessons, broken down into 18 modules, and you can take them at whatever pace is comfortable for you. As you work through the process, it starts out with the theory, goes into the practice, there are experiential activities and exercises, and at the end of the program, you will wind up with an understanding of how practical prayer works, and a practical prayer for yourself that will work to create transformation in your life. And as you know, it works for everything. Take a look at the class online at bethelight.com. There's a sample lesson so you can see how the class is going to work for you, and then dive in. The great news is it's on sale now. You can register and save $20 off of the regular price. I'm looking forward to seeing you in class.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcioni. This conversation is really, really exciting to me.
This is new, or this is creating something new, which is kind of the whole idea. And that's the idea of new thought, is we can have a new experience, and we get to have a new thought first. And it simply addresses the understanding that there's one creative power that creates everything. And that one has created each of us, and that we are using that power to create our next new experience of life. And sometimes we feel like figuring it out and muscling it is the way to go. And that works often enough that we keep trying it. And other times, what we're trying to do is clearly so much bigger than what we can handle that we have to turn it over to prayer. And it's that area in the middle where, well, what do I have to do here? What earth-moving equipment do I need to pick up or rent to push the pieces around? Instead of saying there's an infinite power that's capable of creating this change, and just open to that.
As you were saying that, I was thinking about, I just did a gratitude challenge. And one of the days' gratitude was being grateful for what you know. When I was a total, completely excellent, actually, control freak. I was good.
I'm sure you were good. You were the best.
And I was fine because I didn't know any better. But then when I learned better, I started thinking about, I stop myself. What do I know about this? What do I know about the way things work that will guide me in my next thought or my next step? Now, I'm not at all perfect. The intro says I have some questions. I'm not I'm not perfect, but I will stop and say, what do I know? And I can't tell you how many times I've got to the fourth step in the gratitude and just been grateful for what I know. Because sometimes it doesn't tell me what to do. Sometimes it may tell me what not to do, or just hang tight for a second and see what comes to mind. It's what you it's what you know. But if you don't have to know everything.
Right.
Maybe it's enough to know that you're not in it by yourself and there are other things at work. Maybe.
Yeah. I mean, there's
yeah.
there's the story that you can drive from one side of the country to the other 3,000 miles in the dark with headlights that only reach 200 feet in front of you and see perfectly well the whole way, because you don't need to see the whole thing. You just need to see the next turn.
Yes. Yeah. We should do a whole podcast on that, podcast on that. Like, you don't need to see the whole thing.
Yeah, and that dovetails in so well with what we're talking about now, which is getting something new. When we have the idea that we're going to get to the West Coast, we don't need to understand every turn and every zig and every zag along the way. We don't need to see the entire road before we start on the trip. We can set the intention that we're going to get to San Francisco, and then make sure we have everything that's required to get the trip underway. I mean, we want to make sure that there's gas in the car. It has the likelihood of making it the entire 3,000 miles. Also, that we don't have something in our schedule that's going to require us to be back at home in a day, because we're not going to make it there and back in that amount of time. So there's a little bit of preparation and planning and organization that goes into it. But there's a huge amount of committing to the process and then letting it unfold.
Yeah. I think there's a word that comes up in my mind. It's faith.
Yeah.
And that's a tough one in some circles because it's not defined well enough, I don't think. But in New Thought, just the way you explained what you just did and how you explained it, it explains faith. Like, just hold on a minute. You don't have to know everything. There is a reason that spirit, God, exists. God does have some purpose here. and some abilities. Okay. So how about figuring out where you can let God in? Sometimes it takes a little bit at a time, I think.
I'm going to even turn that around backwards. It's not like God is here too. It's like God was here first. So it's not like God has a purpose for us. We have a purpose for God. So there's this partnership, because we are expressions and individualizations and particularizations of God. So the fact that we're here means that there was an intention for us to be here, and that there's an intention that God had for us to be here. And forgetting that we're in partnership with the infinite doesn't serve us. So
yeah. If you're used to not being a control freak, that's one thing. But when you're when you are, you do have to do a little bit of thinking. Now, I held this up. I don't know if you're going to see it. You can't see that, but you can see the size of it. It's this note that I put on my computer, the stand next to my computer. It says, "Spirit, how do you want to manifest yourself in this service?" And that's a big thing for me, because as a pastor for the number of years that I was, I had to make a lot of decisions and a lot of planning. And then I come from corporate where you do the 5-year plan and the 3-year plan. You're friggin' in control of everything. And and you get comfortable with that, as we talked about. But remembering that I'm not the only one in this. Like how much God is in it, all of that takes a bit of time, but to begin to say, okay, I'm not the only one in this. And so even though I have a good idea about what I like and how I think it should turn out, sometimes that's a feel good for me. It's
Oh, yeah,
I
always.
yeah, it's a feel good for me that I have convinced myself is a good for all. And that was a milestone. So I said, okay, wait a minute, if God is in this, how about consulting and waiting to see what spirit may want to manifest in this, you know? And if God moves in me, through me, as me, there must be a track, so to speak, in me, a God track or some kind of way that God expresses. How about giving God a shot? You know, I don't have, that's not the right words, I know. But
I know exactly what you're saying. And,
okay.
to go back to the story that I told earlier, it would be completely possible for me to go back and get another acorn and another seedling and insist on growing my oak tree from the backyard at my teacher's house. And I might have tried over and over and over again to make that happen and let the arborist take out the oak sapling that was already there
Mm-hmm.
because I had a different idea. No, it has to work this way. And very possible to work at cross purposes to the intention that I actually had, which is to have this oak tree growing in my yard. So we always have the opportunity to open to the guidance, to the vision of what's available and what's possible, and let go of our attachment to it's got to be a little thing in a Dixie cup and it's got to come from that yard and it's got to be planted here. As we let go of controlling the specifics and we are more engaged with what's going on around us, all kinds of possibilities happen. A friend of mine
All
was looking for a relationship. This is years and years and years ago. He was looking for, he basically he'd been married. He wanted to be married again. And he made a 3-page long list of the characteristics of the woman that he was looking for. And unbeknownst to him, the woman that he wound up being married to very happily was making the same sort of list. His 3-page long list, there were 2 things on the list that she didn't match up with. And one was that she's got dark hair. And she's also taller than he had anticipated. And the fact of the matter is, they've been going to the same church for a while. And it was when they opened themselves up to what's possible that they connected.
Yeah. You know what? Long time ago, in church, some individuals some sisters were praying for mates. And, everybody, they were talking about what they wanted. And I said, well, suppose he is short, has less hair than you wanted, and maybe his teeth are not quite all real. And they looked at me like, how in the world do you pray for something like that? I said, no, it's not praying for it. You're praying for this personality, so to speak, but it may come in a package that you're not expecting.
Yep.
And like the light went off throughout the room. And there were a couple that connected with somebody that was right there, in that church. Package a little different, not always less than expected, but I think when you open yourself up, what you get, what you ask for. It may come different. Is that okay?
As we were discussing previously, the less specific we are, if we can be a little bit more general, let go of the actual specifications of what we're looking for. Yeah, do I want a woman who looks like this and talks like this and is educated here and has this much money and all the rest of it? Yeah, that'd be nice. But what I really want to do is feel that heart connection and be connected with my soulmate and let go of redhead. or height or whatever. And when I get that experience, the rest of it falls away.
Yes.
When I get the
Yeah.
important part, the rest of it falls away. Let's take another break, and then we will do a prayer on getting something new.
Learn to put practical prayer to work in your life. The steps are simple to learn and let you begin to get real results to create the life of your dreams immediately. Reverend Bill Marcione's widely acclaimed book, Practical Prayer for Real Results, gives you a clear summary of the new thought principles behind practical prayer and the series of easy-to-understand steps found in the most effective prayers from religions and spiritual practices all over the world and throughout history. Practical prayer is not a replacement for your religion or practice. It's a technique to make the work you do in consciousness even more effective. The book includes 40 prayers on various topics that you can adapt as needed and use as your own. Practical Prayer for Real Results is available in paperback, Kindle, and audiobook on Amazon or at b-the-light.com. That's b-the-light.com.
Welcome back to the Practical Prayer Podcast. I'm Carol, here with Reverend Dr. Bill Marcione, and I enjoy these conversations, but I got to be honest, this is my favorite part.
The prayer part.
Yeah, because it hits home a lot of times, but it helps me to learn and understand how. It's just great. This is my favorite part.
Thank you. And a practical prayer is a specific format for prayer that has been proven to work over the years. And I'm not going to go into the exact steps. That's what the book and the other 134 episodes of the podcast are about. But we end each podcast with a practical prayer based on what we've been discussing. And today the prayer is about getting something new. We are always able to create and invite something new into our lives. And a couple of things happen when we want to do that and when we're going to use a prayer technique to do it. The first thing is we need to be very clear about what it is that newness looks and feels and tastes like. So the more clear we can be about the feeling that we'll have when that newness is upon us, the more latitude that we are allowing that infinite creative power that creates everything to create it for us. And then we get to get out of our own way. If we have been doing things in a particular way and it's not been getting us the result that we're looking for, and we're looking for a different result, we get to let go of the idea that we are going to continue doing what we've been doing, and that's what's going to get the new result. And the prayer is going to encompass all of that. So as we turn our attention away from the world around us, from the specifics, from the path that we've been on, the experiences that we've already had, and we open our awareness of that infinite creative power, that one divine presence, that one love, that one source that we call nature or spirit or God or the Big Bang or whatever it is that was the only thing in the beginning that has been unfolding and releasing and revealing itself as newness and freshness and something different in creation ever since. Everything is that one, unfolding in its own particular way. There is nothing that is not that divine presence. There is nothing that is not God. There is not anything in existence that cannot trace its lineage back to that one source. And that includes me, and it includes each one who is listening to this prayer. We are all divine and perfect expressions of that one infinite power. So all of the good everywhere is available to each of us in our own way. That divine creative power is already working to create the next experience of life that we're having. So as we open to that new experience that we're inviting, as we settle into the tone and texture and flavor of that which it is that we are desiring, we open a channel through which that infinite power can flow to create that newness for us. And it's not necessarily going to flow the way that we decided it's going to flow. It's not going to do it how we would do it, because there is so much more possible as we let go of our attachment to thinking that we already had control over how it's going to happen, as we let go of the thought that it's got to be this way, and open to the experience that we are desiring and seeking. That one infinite creative power flows into our experience to create that newness for us, sometimes in exactly the way that we would have done it, and sometimes in a way that is so completely unexpected that we never would have thought of it. And the good unfolds. And love is at hand. And newness is underway. So as we open ourselves to something new, as we let go of that which has not been working for us, the law responds and the good unfolds. And I'm so grateful for it. I'm grateful for the good that we're each experiencing. I'm grateful for the willingness of each one listening to let go of whatever has not been working, or even what has seemed to be working, but is no longer necessary. And open to that newness. And allow that infinite creative power to create something new and wonderful. I'm so grateful for the wonderful way this is showing up. I'm grateful for the stories that we get to tell about just exactly how quick and uplifting and fabulously successful this process is. And so with gratitude for all of this good, I speak this word and I release it into that creative law, that same creative law that has created everything. And I know that it is already creating this. This good is underway now. And so I let it be. And so it is.
The Practical Prayer Podcast with Reverend Bill Marcioni and Carol Lawrence is a production of BeTheLight.com.
be-the-light.com.
where you can find more information about practical prayer for real results.
Our theme is by Music of Wisdom. You can learn about the spiritual community of New Thought Philadelphia with daily guided meditations,
Weekly celebrations of spirit
and Reverend Bill's classes in practical spirituality
at newthoughtphilly.org.
This podcast is supported by listeners like you. We're grateful for your tax-deductible donation at newnewthoughtphilly.org or the link in the episode description.